Well, hi there, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Real Estate Investing. I'm your host, Sharon Vornholt, and I'm so happy you're here today. My guest is Nashville investor Bill Allen. This is a guy I've been wanting to have on the show for quite some time, so I am truly excited about this show. Bill was a Navy pilot. He's a real estate professional, and he is the CEO and owner of Seven Figure Flipping, where he leads the top house flipping and wholesaling mentoring groups in the nation. But just a few years ago, he was stuck flipping 1 to 2 houses a year, doing all the work himself. Now, I'm sure that's going to sound familiar to a lot of people. Since then, though, he's built a systematized business that runs without him, and he's begun showing others how to do the same thing. Bill and his team currently flip more than 200 houses a year, and in his spare time, he's also the host of the Seven Figure Flipping podcast. So after running his own mastermind groups and his own events, he purchased the training and development company House Flipping HQ. So welcome to the show, Bill.
Thanks for having me, Sharon. I think every time somebody reads a bio like that or kind of what I'm doing, it makes me realize sometimes I'm doing a little bit too much. So,
well, no. Well, I mean, you do a lot, but we appreciate it, and you deserve all those accolades, truthfully. So, I'm so excited to talk about something that people really struggle with as investors, and that is building a team. But before we get into that, you've got such a interesting story about how you got started and how you got from being a struggling investor to where you are. I would like to start there and just have you tell folks your story, how that all came about.
Yeah. So in that intro, you mentioned a lot of the listeners are probably thinking, I'm the one going to the house. I'm swinging the hammer. I feel like I'm doing everything. I'm making the calls. I'm answering the phone. I'm going on the appointments, all of the things that you're doing. And I was there 100%. And I had a full-time job like a lot of your listeners probably do. When you're starting up a real estate business, you're doing it. I was doing it like a side hustle. And it took me a long time to realize that I need to think of this like a business. So my story is I was an active duty Navy pilot. I was always investing. I flew airplanes and helicopters for the Navy for 15 years active duty before I went in the reserves. So I started my, I would say company with like kind of like air quotes, because it was just me and doing a house a year. I was trying to make some more money after I got married and had our first son, Will. And I realized that now I'm responsible for more people than just me. And I didn't want to deploy again. I was really concerned about being away from my family when that kind of life event happened. And so I looked to real estate to get an idea of where it was. And you were one of my very early mentors. I know we just had you on my podcast and shared a lot of that in listening and just trying to understand what would be best for me, flipping, wholesaling, multifamily, land development, all of these different things I looked at and said, I'm interested in flipping houses. I was watching the TV shows at the time, and it was really exciting for me. And I had a couple of rental houses moving around with the Navy, but I just kind of bought another house that I thought would be a rental while I was in Patuxent River, Maryland. I was a test pilot for the Navy at that time. And I was using all my nights and weekends to basically work on this house and find contractors. And I did about half the work myself on that house. And I tried to hire out some other ones. When they didn't show up, I'd have to be there, all of those things, right? So I got that one house done, and I was planning on being a rental, but my realtor said to me, if you sold this, you could make quite a bit of money. I think the market is really good right now. I could sell it. And she wanted a second commission. It was pretty obvious, but she pushed me in that direction. And we ended up selling it and making $45,000 on it. And it was incredible. That was about half the amount of money that I made as a pilot every year, pretty much. So I said, well, why can't I do this more often? Why can't I do 3 of these or 4 of these a year and basically replace my income and then give me a decision whether I want to keep flying or if I want to leave the Navy. So that's kind of the beginning of my journey, was flipping that one house. And then what I realized is it took me a long time to find the next one. I didn't have a system set up to bring in leads on a consistent basis and bring in deals. So it took me about 6 months to find the next project. I had money in my bank account. I didn't have a project, and I was moving from Maryland down to Florida. So this is what the military guys, a lot of the active duty investors that I talk to, we struggle because we move every year, 2 years, 3 years, something like that. So they're constantly trying to learn new markets and different things. So I took that 6 months and studied this new market of Pensacola, Florida. And then even when I got there, it took me another couple months to find that property. So I found another one. I did it again. This one was even more frustrating. I was going to, it was on my way to work. So I'd stop in the morning. On the way there, the contractors wouldn't have done any work. And then I stopped on the way back. And I just ended up basically having 2 full-time jobs at this time. So I did that project. We made about $43,000 on that house. So it was a really good deal. But at that time, I knew that I needed help. I knew I couldn't get out of my own way and do it myself. I had these kind of mental blocks, these limiting beliefs, and I was really cheap and never paid for anything. And I took the profits on that house, invested in myself. And that's when I joined a mastermind group and really got around people that were doing 100, 200 houses a year and never looking at them, because I thought that was not possible, or people were lying, or they're just selling stuff, all of these things that we have in our mind. Right. So that's really what kind of springboarded me into realizing that I had to build systems and a team around myself, especially if I wanted to keep flying for the Navy. And that I was able to build a business as I was flying active duty Navy for about 2 years that was doing over $1 million in profit while I was still working full time. So, but it was around the people and the systems that we created. So that was kind of my journey, wanting to just be with my family. And I ended up being away from them twice as much as I was before, trying to build what I thought was a company or more income, but it was really just me trading time for money, which is exactly the opposite of what I wanted to do.
You said something very interesting there, and I think this is where so many people get hung up, is that you took some of that money and you invested it in your education. People think that they're so afraid to let go of that money, but sometimes, and I'm pretty sure you probably didn't make an insignificant investment at that time. It was probably pretty significant for you. But you have to, for any of us, I mean, that first time you write a check for really not the cheap stuff, it's painful. And you just hope you're going to learn enough to make your money back. But I've never seen it happen where if you didn't apply what you learned, that you weren't going to make it back so long as you did the work. You have to do the work. It's not magic. But putting yourself in the setting where people are successful in the way you want to be successful is key.
Yeah, I'd like to dig into that a little bit if it's okay with you.
Yeah, because, absolutely.
I have, at that time, I had a mechanical engineering undergraduate degree from Georgia Tech. And then I also had a master's degree in aeronautical engineering. So I was an educated person that has spent a lot of money on investing in myself. I also went to test pilot school, which cost the government about $1 million to send a pilot through that program. So when you think about all of the education and the money that was invested in me and what I do, and at that time, I had a library card. So before I spent any money on myself, I had a library card. I was getting my books for free. I was on free forums trying to devour information on there and just totally confused and like spinning in circles in this analysis paralysis, because everybody would have 10 different things that were happening, 10 different ideas, lots of different strategies. You don't know who to believe or who to follow. So I was really in a place where I was really anti-coaching and masterminds and things like that. Just really, I wouldn't even buy a book. I was so cheap. So, to think about that now, it was just a total mindset that had to change for me and say, it is an investment in myself as opposed to an expense. So a lot of people look at these things as expenses. And if I spent $25,000, I'll just put it out there. And from somebody who wasn't even buying books to spending $25,000 on this investment, that was a lot for me. And I did. I went through, it was a ton of money. And to think about taking, I made $43,000. Most people will say, well, I want to put that towards marketing, or I want to put that, but I didn't know what to do. I did not know what the next step was. I was just continuing to go down the same path over and over and over again. I really needed some help. So that mindset shift had to change to the fact that I take that 25,000. So what if in my mind, the straw that broke my back was, if I just do one more deal next year because of the information that I find in this 1 year program, then I'll make this back and then some. So a lot of times what we do is we have no problem paying for our formal education in school and things like that. So we take student loans for $150,000 or $200,000 or more, and then we don't even make money for the next 3 to 5 years. We're paying these things back for 15 years. But we're in an interesting business in real estate where you can invest in yourself like that, and you can immediately build a company. That first year in my company, and by no means am I saying everybody is going to have this exact same result, but our gross profit was almost $700,000 the first year.
Wow.
So when you go from $40,000 to $700,000 with a $25,000 investment, I mean, it's like cheating.
Yeah.
So obviously, I'm a big believer in this, having just bought a mastermind group, of course. But this is really the concept that needs to change in a lot of people's mind, I think. Now, I think the education side, there are a lot of people out there that are not the right people to follow. And then there's people that you resonate with. So the biggest thing that I'll say is find somebody that you resonate with, that you want to emulate, that you want to be your mentor, and then invest in yourself and go follow them and listen to them. They probably have some free content. They have some paid content. They have something, they have different levels up. And I know that you do a lot of this. So in our minds, for us, it's easy, but it's a mindset shift that needs to change in people to not be afraid to invest in themselves and bet on themselves. And like you said, at the end of that year, even if I didn't do one more deal, I changed everything that I think about. The way that I look at the world has totally changed, and the people that I surrounded myself with and the experiences that I have, it was 100% worth it, even if I didn't grow a company. Even if it showed me that that wasn't the right path for me to follow. And after, a year, I said, you know what, maybe I need to do something else, or maybe I should work full time in the Navy and stay there. And I really don't like this thing. Then I think it was worth it, because we go to school for years and years and years. We pay tens and $20,000, $30,000 a year, and we come out with a piece of paper. And at least here we're making money, right? While we're doing it. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And the thing about it is, I look at my granddaughter, who's a freshman in college. She thinks she wants to know, she thinks she knows what she wants to do. And who knows, in 4 years, if she will have gone through all the classes, all the path, and then figure out I'm on the wrong path. This is a child I've been dragging to closing since she was 2. So I think, to invest in yourself at this stage of the game, there's just nothing wrong about it. You have to give up the idea that you can do everything free. And that is definitely a mindset shift.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is once you get to a certain level, like where you are and where I am, or some other people are, we are taking time away from so we're making money in the real estate industry still. I have a company that runs and does hundreds of houses. So I'm really trying to figure out, how do I pull my time and spend it over here to help some other folks get to that same level? And it's cool because in our business, everybody's in a little bit different marketplace. We're not necessarily competing against each other. So exactly. You can give up, like McDonald's isn't going to share their secret sauce, right? But we can, and we do, because we want others to succeed. And that, even just seeing them succeed, is part of our journey, is that impact side of things. So we've got enough money, we've got time back, and now it's about making impact on others. So I think it's a fun journey. I'm having a really good time doing it, but it was if you read some of my posts on some free forums or some different places from 5 years ago, you're listening to a totally different person right now. And it's just because of the journey that I went on. And we have some 22-year-olds or 23-year-olds come in, like you're talking about your granddaughter. And I am so jealous of them, because I was, 36 when I joined. I wish I did that when I was 20, 21, 22, something like that. So
you're lucky that you got to figure it out when you were 36, though. Imagine if the internet comes along a few decades later, and then we're all going, oh my gosh, we were born totally in the wrong decades for this, because it's, I'm a learning junkie. It's like, I never foresee a day when I won't want to learn. And for me to be able to teach others is just a joy. It really is. How did you end up in Nashville? So you were in I know you were in San Diego, you were in Pensacola, you were all over the place. How did you plant yourself in Nashville?
Yeah, so I've moved 15 times in the last 18 years. Gosh. And we pretty much, when I was in the Navy, we were moving every 9 months or so. And it was just me. And then when I got married, we were in Maryland. We moved to Pensacola. And then our plan was to stay there. So if I was going to leave the Navy, I was going to join the reserves. Our middle son, James, he just turned 3. So he's about 3.5 years old now. And he got a heart condition when we were pregnant. So about 20 weeks, we found out that he had a hypoplastic left heart, or hypoplastic right heart. So he only has the left side of his heart, and the right side didn't develop. He's also got a chromosome anomaly that likely caused this. So he's got some developmental issues and special needs. But when we were pregnant, we came up here. We had some family here in Nashville, and we visited this. They didn't have a pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon in Pensacola. So if he was born and needed surgery, they'd have to put him on a helicopter and fly him somewhere. And they said that we could have him in Pensacola, but I just didn't want to risk it at the time. So we explored some different places, went to the Nashville hospital, and we met with the chief surgeon. And I said to him, I looked him in the eye and said, if this was your son and you had the means to move here and the ability to do it, would you, or would you have the baby in a place that doesn't have a surgeon? He said, I would move here. Yeah. And that day we went back to Pensacola the next day, and I went online and I found a house online, and I paid cash. I closed in 10 days. We had everything packed up and we moved inside of a week.
Wow. That's an awesome life story. I mean, you wish you didn't have that story, but yeah, well, that explains that. So, well, Nashville's a great town. I love Nashville.
It is. It's fantastic. My wife loves it here. We actually bought that house. We plan to live in it for 6 months, have James, get him through his first 2 stages of a surgery, and then move back to Pensacola. Mm-hmm. Well, after a couple months of living here, she didn't want to leave. And so we lived in that house for about 2.5 years. And then about a year ago, we just bought another house and moved. Mm-hmm. I can't believe it's been a year. I feel like it was just a couple months ago.
Yesterday.
Yep. I just saw on Facebook that a year ago we were doing the home inspection today. So
oh my God.
We've been in this house for a year now. And I think that's the roots that we planted. My wife's from England, so they have a direct flight here from Nashville to London, which she loves, to go see her parents and everything. So she loves it here, and I miss the ocean, but I like Nashville. It's nice. So that's kind of our story, just, and that was a part of my journey, and really the transformation that had to happen. We moved away from my main market. So we were only in Pensacola, Florida at that time. We moved away. It forced me to come out of my business and start really building the foundation and bringing in the right people. So, and James is also a huge part of my life. He's our middle son, and he really got me to slow down and have a lot of perspective in what I do and become less selfish and really just try to give as much as I can. So he's been a huge influence in my life, and moving here to Nashville, this is his city. This is where he was born. He's had 4 open heart surgeries the first 6 months of his life. And he's just a little fighter, and he's just a huge inspiration to me and a lot of people. So,
wow. Well, let's talk about you've hinted there about building a team, and that's how you've managed to make this shift. And I think this is such a hard concept for people. So how many people do you currently have on your team today?
I have about 16 people inside the real estate company, so Blackjack, and then I have about 10 people in the 7-figure flipping company. So we probably have about 25 to 30 people that work for us, and then we have some part-time folks as well. That it's like some VAs and some other people that are a little bit more part-time. So I usually say we have about 30 people, I'd say.
So you added those people. You went from 5 years ago from really not having anybody. Have I got that timeline correct?
Yep, that's right. It's probably about 4.5 years ago. It was just me. And I even remember talking to my mentor when I joined the 7-figure flipping mastermind group. I said, I don't want to hire anybody. I'm scared to hire somebody. I don't want to. I'm fearful of being responsible for them. I don't want to be required to put food on their table, take care of their kids, all that stuff. I was so scared. And I remember it was Andy McFarland. You and Andy know each other.
I do know Andy, yeah.
And so just a phenomenal guy. He said to me, Bill, you don't have to have the business that I have, but you're telling me that you want to flip 12 houses. You want to keep flying a year. You want to keep flying for the Navy, and you're going to do all that on your own. So I don't think it's possible. And here's why. And why don't you go think about it, come up with a plan, and then come back to me, and then we'll decide where we go from here. And so I took about 2 or 3 days, and I really thought about it. And I talked to my dad. My dad was an entrepreneur after he was in the Navy. He was on submarines. And then he built a electrical engineering company, a mechanical engineering company. And I said, hey, what's it like having other people work for you? He said, there's nothing better, son. It's the best feeling ever to actually write a paycheck for somebody else.
And I say, here you go.
Yeah. And really, he said that really kind of filled him up. And so I thought about that, and I said, okay, this is just another story that I'm telling myself in my mind that I'm scared of. And so it's just the next step to say, okay, I'll submit. Let's try it. You tell me more about what it's like. And so the next call with Andy, I said, all right, you just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And because he was incredibly successful and I wanted to model success. That was what it was all about. That's what I paid for, is to model success. And so I put up an ad. I got out of my comfort zone and hired that first person, because the biggest thing for me is I was going to send a lot of marketing, and I had a budget for it, but I couldn't answer the phone. I would fly 10 or 12 hours a day, every day, well, 5 days a week. And then we had to work 1 or 2 weekends every month. And so I knew that Andy kept telling me, you got to answer the phone live. You got to answer the phone live. You can't send it to a backup service or a voicemail. And the market is changing. Everybody's sending it to voicemail. If you're answering live, you're going to have a leg up. And so I said, okay, I'm going to put this in my budget. I'm going to find somebody. I'm going to hire somebody. And that's what I did.
That was your first hire, someone to answer the phone.
That was it for me. And my recommendation for anybody listening is you might not necessarily follow my footsteps. Your first hire might be a bookkeeper. It might be a project manager. It might be a salesperson to go on appointments because you're not very good. What I always teach people now is really figure out where you're good and where you're not good. And instead of strengthening and fortifying your weaknesses, just dive right into your strengths and then hire out your weaknesses. So if you're like an accountant, if you're a CPA and you're really good at that, and it might be the last thing that you give up, as long as it's moving the needle for you.
Right. I think every business is different. And I remember talking to Andy about team building. So I remember that podcast pretty clearly. I know you and I share an idea when it comes to building a team, and it's about building around values. I really believe you can teach skills. Obviously they have to come in with something, bring something to the table, but you can teach skills, but you cannot teach somebody that's not a fit for your culture or your core values. And also they have to fit, the team has to be a fit. So I wanted to talk about that for a minute. So what do you have? I mean, a lot of companies, they start out with one and then they have an independent contractor or two, and they're kind of stuck. Maybe they know what they want their business to look like, but maybe they don't. Maybe they haven't even thought about this. They're thinking purely mechanical. I need a bookkeeper or I need a telephone answer. But don't you think you have to have an idea about that in the beginning? Looking back on it, you kind of have to have a vision. And I think a lot of people skip this part.
Yeah,
I did a long time ago.
I agree 100%. I built this company not knowing that, not thinking about that. And we had 110% turnover when I brought in my COO, and we really tried to build up the foundation again. And a lot of it was because we looked at the resumes, we looked at the background, we looked at that kind of stuff. And we weren't really focused on the personality profile potentially and the core values, and making sure that we had the right people that we didn't have to necessarily hold accountable and manage really tightly, because they're self-motivated people. And so that's the change that we saw. So looking back, I think the number one thing is core values, 100%, like you said. I think that the skills and strategy and all of those things can be poured into somebody. You can build off that. But if you have the person who is, let's just use a salesperson, somebody that goes in a house and negotiates contracts for you. You could have somebody who is the best salesperson, but doesn't fit your values, doesn't fit the company, and is constantly going to be a struggle for you. They're going to probably put the wrong message out there to your sellers, or buyers, or whatever you're using them for, and really not represent you and the company the way that you should. So, I mean, one of our core values is integrity, and it's really, really important to me to have just do what we say we're going to do all the time, and especially when nobody's looking. So, when you have somebody who might make back of the envelope deal, or being a little bit shady out there in their negotiations and things like that, it's not something that I want in the company. I don't care how much money they could potentially make the company for it. In the long run, we'll lose because of that. So the biggest thing for me is core values, and making sure that their personality is such that it fits the role. So we operate off Traction. It's a entrepreneurial operating system, a book by Gino Wickman, who I absolutely love this concept. And he uses the term right people, right seats. So if you have the wrong person in the right seat, that means that they're a salesperson, but they're the wrong person for the company. If you have the right person in the wrong seat, it means you have somebody who has the core values and is a good fit for the company culture, but they're not doing the job that they should be doing based on probably their personality profile or what their background or history is. And if you have the right person in the right seat, that's where you really see things take off. And we've had to move some people around where we have the right person, but they're just in the wrong role. And we've moved them around a little bit and try to find spots for them. And sometimes you have the right person and you just don't have a seat for them. And they just have to get off the bus. I hate to say it, but just because they're great people doesn't mean they're going to the company ATM all the time for us. So when I was getting started, I was putting ads out on Craigslist. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just interviewing people. And what I do feel like I did a good job of was I kind of hired with my gut in the beginning. And when my gut didn't feel right, then I would say no. And when it did feel right, I would say yes. Looking back, I really do think that was just core values of me and culture. And a lot of people, I guarantee if there's people that are listening to this podcast right now that have people working for them, they know that there's somebody on their staff right now that's just something's off. And you maybe can't put your finger on it and know exactly what's wrong. That's typically a core value issue. There's something that they're doing like they're fulfilling their role pretty much. There's not something very specific that they're doing wrong. It's just something that is not right. And that's a core value just rearing its ugly head.
Yeah, you said something's off, and that's a key. You can't put your finger on it, and you just don't know what it is. But yeah, I think you do get a gut feeling about people.
Yep. And when you hire and reward and advance people in your company based on these things, core values, as well as Gino talks about the get it, want it, and have the capacity for the job. Those things are what will show you how someone's doing. You'll really start seeing that. You'll be able to put your finger on now what's off. And for us, we have 5 core values, and everybody in the company knows them and lives by them. It's extreme ownership, it's stewardship, hardworking, integrity, and personal and professional development. So in every quarter, we're ranking people. And every time we have a people problem, somebody's just not fitting for some reason, we'll just say, hey, let's go through these and see what's up. Okay. And that usually flushes out a lot of issues.
So do you use personality tests at all when you're hiring?
We do. Yeah. So that's the first thing that we do. I would say when I was getting started, I didn't. And what I recommend for the early companies is to use something that's free. Or and the DISC, the DISC test has changed a lot lately. So they've gotten rid of a lot of the free stuff. We used to use Tony Robbins' site for the DISC, and it's not necessarily free anymore. So there's some paid areas, and the structure and outline is a little bit different. But we now use a paid service. It costs us about $10,000 the first year and $6,000 a year after that. So. Ooh. Yeah. So people are like, whoa, it's like 5 figures to do that. Right. But the way that I look at it is a bad hire now, and look at my company is way different than others, right? We have 30 people over 2 companies, and one bad hire is going to cost you 5 or 10 times their salary.
Exactly.
So, I mean, one bad hire, and I'll spend tens of thousands of dollars for that, because our human capital right now is it's a third, if not half of our overall overhead. So, I mean, I have $1 million payroll in my real estate company, which when people hear that, they go, whoa, that's insane. Right. So $10,000 for me is a drop in the bucket. And this is the beginning of our funnel. If you don't make it through the personality profile, so we know exactly what we're looking for in that seat. And it allows me to, instead of talking to, 20 people a day that are applying for a job, there might be 1 or 2 every couple of days that come through that fit that. And I won't even look at a resume now until I get the right profile. So
that's really smart. That's really smart though. Like you said, and people need to understand, you didn't start your business with your first hire, go off on this system. You have to baby step your way into this type of a business. But I think it's super helpful to know, if you're here and you want to be here, what are all the benchmarks along the way? What are all the steps? What are all the upgrades? Even like the personality test. What are the things? I mean, it would be super helpful for somebody to hand you a roadmap and go, okay, you're here at A, but in order to get down here to Z, you're going to have to accomplish all of these things and make all these changes and write these checks and all of that. But unfortunately, maybe if they're in your coaching program, they get that. But in most cases, you don't have that kind of a roadmap.
Yeah. And that's what I felt when I was getting started. I felt like I understood what the puzzle was supposed to look like, and I had all the pieces. I just didn't know how to put it together. It's kind of the mental image that I tried to remember 4 or 5 years ago is all the information was there, but it was so confusing because I was kind of all over the place. And I really just needed all this information to be directed in one place and just say, look, show me, like you said, kind of the roadmap, like what does that look like? And it's going to be different for everybody.
Right.
A lot of it is our journey, right? There were times where I made mistakes. I've lost money on houses. I've made bad hires, even with the personality profile. It's not a fix all, know all, everything. And so, but for me, it was about like just having the support of other people who have walked the path before me and just asking them, hey, what would you recommend or what would you do if you were me here? And just asking. I mean, I was in that Facebook group, just pounding that thing every day. I would post 3 or 4 times, and I was probably the most annoying gnat around, but I was also the person who didn't know anything. And like you said, I'm a lifelong learner. And if I can, each experience that I got me a little bit closer to the destination that I wanted to go. So yeah, if they're listening and like, do not spend $10,000 on a hiring system, a personality profile. I'd say you got to get to the point where you start understanding. The first thing that I would do is say, what are my core values? Like, who am I? And pull that out, because that's going to structure where you go. And if I did that 5 years ago, I would have gotten to where I am now even faster. Because there were times where I was like, I would hold on to people way too long. I was emotional decision maker, try to fix. I knew that they were the wrong fit, but and then I would look at their resumes and try to justify the fact that they have that experience, but my gut's telling me this might not be the right person, or they're not going to be with me very long, or they move around from job to job to job. And now it's more of a science. And as an engineer, I love that. It's like zeros and ones, and it's very binary. Do they fit the personality profile? Do they have a resume that gets them in the door? And then I start having a conversation with them. And I try to compare apples to apples instead of just having different conversations with lots of different people.
It is one of the most painful lessons I had to learn early on in one of my, way back before real estate and the home inspection business and all of that. I was actually in the medical field, and I managed a medical practice. And boy, I was so guilty of trying to fix people and save people. And that is just such an enormous mistake to do that. They, like you said, wrong person, wrong seat, maybe just wrong person. But that was something I had to completely get over. And I think having an engineer brain, I have a lot of engineer friends. Everything is like drop down menus and spreadsheets, and it's on point. It's either black or white. And I'll go sometimes, well, maybe you might have a little bit of gray. No, it's black or white. So we've had some interesting conversations. So for the person who is trying to make their first hire, what I hear all the time is, I don't have any money. What do they do? What is the step they take? You kept your job. You did a house, so you had your money. So maybe that's what they need to do. What if they've already quit their job? Then what do they do?
Yeah, I think a lot of that, if you don't have money and you don't have a runway to get rolling, I really think that you have to take a step back and say, okay, how's that going to happen? Because in this business, there's a lot of people that are teaching that you don't need any money to get going in wholesaling. You don't need anything. But I'll tell you right now, I'll be the first one to say that that's not true.
Yes.
And you've got to have a plan. And if you don't have money, then you have to have time. If you want to hire somebody and you want your time back, you've got to have some money to do that. And you've got to have a runway that's longer than a couple weeks, because if I'm going to hire somebody, I'm responsible to this person, right? So stewardship is one of my core values. I want to be a good steward to myself, the company, others, the people in the community that we're working with. But I remember that first conversation with my first employee. Her name was Dee Dee. And I said to her, Dee Dee, I don't know how long this is going to go. Like I have this plan. Here's my vision. Here's my dream. I'm around all of these other high level entrepreneurs that are doing this. I know that I'm going to do it. And I cast the vision and dream for her, and the inspiration and motivation for her to say, okay, I'm willing to follow you, and let's do it together. And so that conversation was open and honest from the beginning. So I had 6 months of money to pay her, 6 months of money to market. And I had my marketing plan and my strategy over 6 months. And I knew that after 6 months, if we didn't get a deal, that I was going to have to let her go and we're going to close up shop, or I'm going to figure something else out. It's like that. What's next? What's the next plan? And that doesn't mean I just ran everything for 6 months and didn't look at the numbers. But what it does mean is that it wasn't going to be 2 weeks and then I wouldn't be able to afford to pay her. And I had to get a deal in 2 weeks. So I see a lot of people come into coaching, they come into mentorship, they come into anything. They try to get in this business and they think that they can do it with nothing, with no time, no money, no plan. And maybe they have a month of savings. And when that's gone, they feel like desolate. They're isolated. They are just going, what happened? I mean, I thought in a month I was going to get my first deal and then I'd make $20,000 and then I could afford the rest of the program or the rest or my staff. And so, the majority of businesses shut down the first year. Very rarely do they last more than 5 years. And even that you go out 10 years, it's a couple percent. So you've really got to think, instead of thinking short-term, I want to think a long-term strategy. I want to think about this business is 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. What's the legacy that I'm going to leave and how am I going to do it? And honestly, it was following people like you and Andy in the beginning and seeing what they were doing and that they've been in this business for a while and they're really good people. Your guys' core values is what pulled me in. Justin pulled me in with his core values in his podcast. So, it changed my whole belief just by listening to something and spending $25,000 is unbelievable that you can do that. So I would say to those people is, you've really got to have a plan, figure out what it looks like. And then it's not the fact that you don't have money, but it's where is the money going to come from?
Right.
What is it going to look like? How am I going to do it? And then maybe you have a 50-50 partner in the beginning that has money, or maybe you bring in some family money or some debt like that. Just venture capitalists don't start up their business with, they're investing in companies. These startups are taking on debt, but the person that's coming in, you've got to be upfront and honest with them about what the upside is and what the downside is. So if you are going to raise basically operational debt for a company like that that's starting for staffing and things like that, then make sure that person knows the risk, because that's pretty high risk. And just so everybody knows, it took me, even joining this mastermind group, it took me 4.5 months to get my first deal. So that first year, I joined in December. I went to my first meeting it was either late December or early January. And 4.5 months later is when our first $10,000 check hit the bank. And I had a $30,000 budget over those 6 months. I was spending $5,000 a month. So I was just over $20,000 into my investment before I made my first 10. So I was still in the red. And then we did 2 deals the next month, and then 3 deals, then 5 deals. And it just started taking off. And by the end of that year, we did $120,000 that December of that first year. So
there's a runway though. There's always a runway. And with marketing, there's definitely a runway.
Yep. And it builds on itself, right? So it's over time, you're just and marketing is an investment too. Everybody thinks marketing is an expense. Mentorship, coaching, marketing, all this stuff. People, I am investing in my staff. Every paycheck that goes out, I don't look at those people as an expense. I'm investing in them. I'm investing in my company. Personal and professional development is huge with me. So I am constantly trying to say, what else can I do for my team? What else can I do for my staff? How can we develop them? Because the more I develop my leaders in my team now, the better the company becomes, the more money we make, the bottom line grows. It's amazing to see that the more we pour into others, the more we get back from a company and everything.
Well, let me ask you this. So I think I know the answer to this question, but so when you hire someone, or let's just even take your existing staff, you're not focusing so much on tasks and giving them, you need to do these 10 things, more like this is your job, or this is your project, and this is the end result I expect. Is that more the philosophy in your company?
So it was in the beginning. I would say that I would kind of, I'm very, so I have a profile that is it's a visionary, but I can also get things done myself. So, and in this culture index, I use a company called Culture Index. It's called The Architect. So a lot of times what I do, one of my problems is I will show somebody the finish line, but never show them how to get there and just expect them to get there.
Okay.
And so that's what I was doing in the beginning of my company, and not realizing that I would do it all the time. And it still happens today. Like I still struggle with that. It's like, I told you what I wanted done. How do you not know how to do it? Like
how to get from A to B.
Right. Really, really like A to Z. So like I try to show them Z and we're at A, and I expect everybody to be able to think like me and maneuver this the same way that I would. And so now what I do is what we really try to do is walk them through the concept, build out process and procedures that are documented that they can follow very easily. So, and we work together. In the beginning, what I did with my staff, and this is a good tip for anybody who's getting going with their first employee or second employee, is have them just give them like a blank sheet of paper and say, when you do this task, write down each step that you're doing. And what they're doing is they're basically building those processes and procedures inside of your company for you. So in the beginning, you're doing things every day. I mean, when you check your email, you have some process or procedure around that. And you have an efficient way to do it and an inefficient way to do it. So in the morning, when you wake up in your bed and you're checking your email right away, like everybody does, it's an inefficient way to do it because now you can't respond or the signature is different. But if you can sit down and block off a certain hour in the morning, hour in the afternoon to check email and respond to email and maybe schedule it, you can actually build a process around it the right way. And then if everybody starts following that, then if that employee leaves or that staff member leaves, you have the process, the as-is process, and you can constantly tweak it to say, what should it look like? And so we do a lot of that inside the company. And now, fortunately, I have people who are a lot better than me at this. So the managers in the company, we have a sales manager, we have an operations manager, a marketing manager, and a finance manager, a controller. So they are able to build out the processes better than me and manage their staff, but we will not hold their hand and micromanage. That's a big thing. We're all virtual. We're delegating, and we will never micromanage people. You need to be self-disciplined, self-motivated inside this company, and just try to be as good as you can at the process. But in the beginning, we got to show them how to do it. You can't just expect them to already come in. Otherwise, they're running their company how they want, instead of the other way around. So.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's harder to break somebody's bad habits. Let's say they came from another company. I think it's harder to break their habits than to say right from the beginning, no, this is the way we do it. This is our culture. This is the process we use, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah, that's a lot of the reasons why I typically would prefer to hire somebody from values and culture than their background in this industry. So in the beginning, I was like very anti real estate agent. For our salespeople, I did not want to hire real estate agents. I've gone away from that a little bit more now, but if you've been a real estate agent in retail side for 20 or 30 years, and I'm asking you to go make an offer at 40% of value or 50% of value, you just go, it would be so much easier to get a commission from this. Right. And you're going to go into each one of those conversations taking the easy path, right? You got the easy way and you got the hard way. Everybody's going to take the path of least resistance typically. But if you don't know any better and you're just, okay, sure, I'll do that. Well, I mean, that's what we do, of course. And it's just a total shift. And even when you roll out new process and procedures inside the company, when we make changes, some of the old dogs don't want to do the new tricks, right? So we're constantly changing and shifting. And a lot of times they'll find a reason not to and just put up resistance, even though we're trying to help them, we're trying to make them more efficient and ultimately have them make more money. So you constantly have to be working with that. With people, there's always something going on. The other thing that I'll recommend is once you start working with people is if you deeply, truly care about them and you want to see them succeed, it'll shine through anything. They don't care how much money you make, how much money the company makes. And a lot of times with us, we're small companies and it's just 2 or 3 of us. And what I see a lot is you're afraid to treat this like a business. This truly is like share your numbers, share a lot of the things that you're doing, things like that, really hold everything really close to the chest. They feel that. Your people will feel that. The more open and honest and upfront you are. Like I just did a call yesterday with the 7-figure flipping family, like my employees and staff in that company. And I shared our 1-year plan, our 3-year plan, our 7-year picture, and the gross profit, the revenue, the profit numbers, the targets, all that stuff. And we're just an open book there. And I think that I said, hey, here's time for I just want to go around the room and get feedback from all of you guys. Cause a lot of new staff that we have, I've hired some new people recently. About half of the staff is pretty new, 3 months or less. And they looked at me and said, I've never been in a company like this where most companies I worked for, it would be like 4 or 5 years before I saw any of this stuff. And this is my second month. Right. It's really refreshing to see that an owner that cares about us, that's willing to be open and vulnerable and share with us. So it's huge when you're managing people. So your entire staff is virtual? My entire staff is virtual. Okay. Yes. So we just got an office here in Spring Hill, Tennessee. So I'm about 30 minutes south of Nashville for my marketing department in 7-figure flipping. We move in, I'm actually doing a walkthrough this afternoon to look at it for the first time. It's just so 3 or 4 of us can sit down and throw some things on the wall
Mm-hmm.
together in person, because I will say that it's more powerful when you're in person than virtually.
Yeah.
You can get a lot more done. You're a lot more efficient, but we have no office. We do meet every quarter in person with my management staff in both companies. We do the EOS process where we'll have a quarterly meeting and an annual planning session. And we have a coach. We hire a coach that comes in. I'll spend about 6 figures between the two companies this year on a business coach from EOS. Yeah.
So do you have in between times do you use Zoom or Slack, or what are your most efficient means of communication with these other people?
Yeah, so in 7-figure flipping, we use Asana for task management.
Asana.
And so we have a content calendar. So we put out a lot of podcasts, and we put out all kinds of content and emails and things like that. What we found was we're stepping on each other's toes. We'll send an email out to our members, then we'll send an email out to our big list, and then we'll have a podcast email, and it'll all go out on the same day. So people will be getting 4 emails from us. It's a little bit too much. So we really wanted to get all of that together and get organized. So we use Asana for that. And then so we've gotten everything out of email in that company, and just everything's in Asana. And then in Blackjack, we have a structure. We use Podio for Blackjack. So we're tagging people in Podio and things like that. But we are like, Slack is our next thing to look into. My concern is constantly layering like technology on top of technology on top of technology. So we really want to simplify it. So we have a system in Blackjack is, look, you can send an email, but your email has a couple different headlines. It can be info, it can be action, it can be urgent. And then if it's something that you need an answer to within an hour, then you're picking up the phone. And calling somebody. Like, it's that easy. Like, really, if you need an answer from me and it's urgent, and they're not going to get me right now because my phone's on airplane mode, but you just call me or send me a text message. But like, for us, we have different kind of process. What I saw was somebody would just use it as an excuse to say, oh, well, so-and-so didn't get back to me on time. That's why I missed my deadline. And I tagged them in Podio, but they didn't check. So, the lead team has their own system set up. So they're constantly talking to each other. I think they use a group text message or WhatsApp. So everybody, like, I give my management staff enough leeway to do what they need to do to get things done. I know, Becca, she runs she was running the marketing department, and she loved Asana. And I said, Becca, if this is your thing and you love it and it's what you want your team on, and then use it. We'll get it. Yeah. And so what I know is there's a lot of people that are smarter than me out there, and using all their skills and ability and not knocking them down and stifling their plan and what they want to do. That's the most important thing when you become a true leader. Like, we're talking about leadership here.
Right.
And that's it. It's about giving the people rope, not thinking you know everything, and hiring people that are a lot better than you at what they do. So
rather than, every company has to have rules and things like that, but you have procedures, more procedure, core values based, and certainly everybody has to come to work or do their work, whatever. But do you have any challenges with people having that much freedom to?
So we did, and we would try. So here's the biggest tip that I have for all those listening that are worried, or they have some staff members that are taking advantage. My real estate company is called Blackjack Real Estate. And I used to say that our staff is going to the Blackjack ATM. They're just basically hitting the ATM. They're not necessarily putting in the time, or they're not going above and beyond what we would expect just an average employee to do. And what I started to do was incentivize them and change their plan and put in these systems in place to basically like spy on them and manage them. And what I realized is we just have the wrong people. Like, that will fix your problems. If you have the wrong people, you're constantly going to have to be financially incentivizing them to do something that you already hired them to do,
right? Or
to manage them when, like, right now, I have to tell my people to stop working. Like, at 10 o'clock at night, I'm getting email like, go be with your family, And so those are the kind of people, if you bring in those people, they manage themselves.
Right.
So we do have some, we had to put in a system with our phone people, our phone staff that was hourly at the time. So I would feel comfortable that they were actually working those hours that they were logging. And it's called Hub Staff. So we use a system called Hub Staff. And it's basically take screenshots of their computer while they're working, and they can clock in and clock out of it. And that's how we track their hours and pay them based on their Hub Staff hours. It also shows productivity. So it'll show if they're 30% productive for the day by mouse movements and things like that, and clicks.
Wow.
and or they're 70 or 80%. So then we
Yeah.
could do is we could put the racehorses next to each other and see like who's doing what, and not necessarily to say you're not doing this, but say, hey Val, how are you so productive each day? Like, what are some of the things that you're doing that make you really productive and make you stand out? Because you're setting more appointments than anyone else. You're answering more calls. You're getting more commissions. So what is it that you're doing that we can help the other team do? And so we can learn from a lot of that stuff. And then also, obviously, we're tracking the metrics and the numbers and how they're doing. But what I realized looking back is this would have, and sometimes it's kind of a catch-22, because in the beginning, you might not have the money or the budget or anything to hire that rock star salesperson or that rock star person, that COO that can come in and do everything and run the company like we have now. But you'll build up to that. And so your journey is figuring a lot of this stuff out. So don't go out and beat yourself up that you have to hire the perfect person right in the beginning. I will say that hiring and firing is a skill. It's the number one skill that you'll have, and you'll have to learn it the hard way. And in the beginning, I thought that my staff would be with me forever. I really did. But the company just started growing, and they couldn't grow with it. Yeah. And when that happened, we outgrew them, and they kind of pushed themselves out, and they were ready to go. And then we would just, kind of the top grading concept of just bringing in some better talent. And now, fortunately, we're at a point where we can go out and kind of headhunt some of those people and pull them from other companies, and you'll get there. That's just, it's part of the process. But if you start from these great people who are self-motivated and self-disciplined to work, and hardworking is one of your core values like mine, then a lot of times you'll find the people that are really driven and self-motivated. If you look at those core values that I mentioned for me, you have somebody who's hardworking and their personal and professional development is high. Those two things go hand in hand. You've got somebody who really wants to work hard and wants to grow personally and inside their job. So if you have people that are really strong in those two areas, you're going to have to tell them to stop working sometimes. You're going to have to really, they're going to be reading books, voraciously reading and studying, and they're going to be involved in their job and really trying to develop themselves instead of the people who just clock in and clock out. Yeah. So that virtually a clock in and clock out person, that's really hard. So
that's not your person.
No.
It's not your person. Well, I have 3 more final questions for you, short ones. This is just a great show, Bill. We talked a little bit. I was going to ask you who your mentor is that directly impacted your success, but I know who that was. So you mentioned that several times.
Yeah, well, I will say that, I'll say, Sharon, that you were one of the very early ones. And we talked about it on my show that it was about the integrity. And because wholesaling to me was kind of seemed like a dirty word at the time because I was a flipper and I've seen some other wholesalers and it seemed shady. And so when I saw you and then I saw Andy, I met Andy McFarland in person, like you guys really changed my whole limiting belief on what a wholesaling person and company could be. So, and that just goes to my integrity core value. So,
well, thank you. What is your favorite book that you've read in the last 12 months?
Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. It's,
okay, I've not read that one. Extreme Ownership.
So we had 4 core values until my COO, Nate, and I read that book. And Jocko came to speak at one of our events this past year. He is just an amazing, he's a retired Navy SEAL and runs a company that teaches leadership and ownership. And this ownership concept is so incredible to think about that we added it as one of our core values because that's what we're talking about throughout all of this is I take responsibility for what I do. And so if I'm not working, I'm not going to hit the company ATM. It's my fault. I'm going to make sure that I'm doing what I need to do and all the time. And it's a phenomenal book. It's unbelievable. It changed my life and my business. I would recommend it to every single person that I meet. And I pretty much do. Okay. And it's Jocko Willink, Willink. I want to be sure and put that in the show notes. Gosh, you picked a book I don't know. Darn. Okay. He's got a couple other ones too. The Dichotomy of Leadership is one that follows up on that. Phenomenal. He's also got some kids books, Way of the Warrior Kid, really cool. He's just an inspiration. He's a great guy to meet. It was awesome to hang out with him for a couple of days. I'll bet. So if we leave people with one piece of advice that you can give them wherever they are in their own business, when it comes to building a team, what would that one piece of advice be? Well, I'd like to separate this into two, and they'll probably come
Okay.
back together. But in your life, in your business, I think like knowledge without action is nothing. So
Mm-hmm.
people that'll listen to these podcasts and read books, and we talked a lot about knowledge and investing in yourself. And then Sharon mentioned that you have to go out there and do it. So like the action is really what's going to create the results and change everything here. Is going out, taking action, seeing results, and even small results. So get out there and actually do something with all of this. And whether it's knocking on your first door, sending out your first letter, and that goes with to your second point of building a team,
Mm-hmm.
is you just got to get out there and do it. So it's scary hiring somebody, being responsible for them. I've had to write payroll checks for my personal account. I don't think you really become an entrepreneur until you do that, probably. And there's all kinds of stuff that's happened along the way, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I feel like I could be dropped on the corner of any city with no money, and I can put together a team and I could build something with the knowledge that I have right now. It's almost like a full-on PhD in business. So you got to get out there and do it. If I just said no at that time, things would be a lot different right now than when I just hired that person. I got uncomfortable and I went out there and did it. So
You have to spend a lot of time outside your comfort zone.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Bill, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy day. I know you've got a ton of stuff going on, and this information that you shared today is going to serve people no matter where they are. They can refer back to this. This is what I'd like to think of as being an evergreen podcast for sure, because where people are today and where they are in a year or two will be completely different. And folks, you can go back and pull stuff out of here, and a year from now that you'll hear different things that maybe you just didn't even hear today. So what is the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
I think that they can just go to sevenfigureflipping.com and find us there. So it's the number 7 figureflipping.com. That's probably the best place. My team and they answer all this information, things like that, like emails and requests and stuff.
Well, I'm going to take just a second and have you talk about that program before we go. That's one thing I did want to do.
Okay. Yeah. So we have a couple, really, like throughout the year, the only thing that we do is we work with more high level entrepreneurs right now. So if you're doing $200,000 or more in your business, 10 deals or more a year. So consistently doing deals, and the stuff that we're talking about building a team and systemizing the business, that's really what we do each year. I feel like the newer folks, they really need to go through together, like at paced. So we used to bring people in kind of evergreen, like you mentioned, throughout the year. But what I found was they had a little bit of a problem kind of working together. I think of it like a tribe. We're like a group of people, like this tribe that's moving together. So we have an event called Flip Hacking Live every year in October. This year it's in Orlando. So if you're listening to it in 2020, that's this year. It's in Orlando, October 15th through the 17th. And then we mentioned the runway kind of thing. We call it the 7-figure runway. This is kind of the newer structure of it. So I put aviation themes when I bought the company, but those folks are newer people. So they're a little bit getting going, not ready for that 7-figure altitude group yet, and they can just jump in together and work through. So that's where we're 3 months into the first program that we did with these folks, and we're seeing some incredible results from them getting their first deals, consistently doing deals, hiring people, and they're starting to move up into the next level of that 7-figure altitude group. So that's, hopefully that explained it. It's kind of what it is. We have different events every year. We have 3 events a year, and then we have our big event. And that Flip Hacking Live event is something that I would highly recommend you guys attend. It's anybody in real estate, business, life. My mom and dad came this past year, and my mom stood up and said, I don't even know anything about real estate, and I got a lot of things from this. It has changed the way that I think about stuff. So we bring in different speakers and just kind of challenge the mindset and motivation of folks, and obviously give a bunch of real estate value. So that's what it looks like.
You let me know when the events are, and I'll be sure to push them out to the people that listen to the podcast, because I know that it's such super valuable training. So once again, Bill, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Sharon. I had a great time. This is kind of like a dream of mine. I would listen to your podcast when I was getting started. You really kind of instilled in me this integrity of a wholesaler that can actually, I mean, I remember you would always talk about like being a grandmother, and I said, okay, like what is sweeter than showing up and there's a grandmother showing up to buy your house like that? If you can do it, then I know I can do it. And that's the big theme that hopefully people take away from anything that we do out there is if one person can do it, so can somebody else. And you don't have to be special. You don't have to do anything. We're just like ordinary people and creating extraordinary results. So thank you for having me. It's awesome.
It's been great fun. I'm sure we'll do it again. And thanks to all the listeners for stopping by today. If you love this show, please take a minute and leave us a review and a rating over on iTunes. I would greatly appreciate it. And I will see you next week, same time, same place. Bye for now.